Hey guys, Gons here for the Face Like the Sun channel. Thanks for checking in. If you value the work we do here on this channel, please consider supporting us on Patreon so we can bypass all the corporate censorship and continue to share the truth of the gospel through this unique medium. If you're new to this channel, welcome. We talk about all kinds of crazy stuff here, and one thing we've been discussing a lot lately is the advent of AI upon our civilization and how most people are totally asleep to this reality hitting us right in the face, especially evangelical Christians in America. And I say that in response to viewing the recent video put out by Aaron and Melissa Dykes at Truth Stream Media. If you haven't checked them out, do so. They're awesome. They have a video titled "Society is Being Programmed by a Black Box," and it really resonated with me and all the things that we've been talking about on this channel and through the years with Canary Cry Radio and everything else. And it drove home a point that's been really on my mind and my heart recently, and that is that both sides of the political aisle were absolutely played this election cycle. And how? And by what? By algorithms, bots, deep neural networks, and a sentient world simulation. And that makes perfect sense if you consider the amount of chaos and upheaval that's been created in the last several months. Now, in the video, they go into individuals that use that data to manipulate the situation out there. But I think these men are being played by the AI. And this is where things potentially get really dark. And I'll share an article with you that confirms these suspicions. Now, if you add to all this bizarre behavior of the ones labeled liberal left, and in response, the conservative right, pointing at them and laughing, making a career out of the whole thing, it's just remarkable what we've become. It's crazy. And it just drives home this point that we are already at war with AI, with artificial intelligence. Now, Ephesians 6:12 tells us, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." In other words, we wrestle against an unseen hierarchy of non-corporeal intelligences, minds without bodies, so to speak. Now, we've been at war with this non-flesh part of reality and its entities ever since the fall of man, when, in my opinion, certain perceptions into these extra-dimensional worlds was effectively taken away from us. And perhaps that's why God told Adam not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, since it caused us to lose this capacity to perceive into these unseen worlds. And if you really think about it, these concepts align with the exploding popularity of paranormal experiences and investigations, and even the compelling data that are being collected, these unexplainable things that are labeled and defined as supernatural or above nature. So this interaction has always existed between man and this unseen side. But as the virtual worlds come online and opens up to human civilization more and more, we are effectively entering and building for ourselves the manifestation of the darkest and most disturbing parts of our humanity. That's why we've seen things like Pizzagate, Pedogate, Spirit Cooking, and the rest come out into the open. These things were always there. We've talked about some of these issues and the Satanism that's been going on for years and years and years. Now it's out there. And these are the dark corners of a disturbed humanity, which exists amongst our fellow man. Okay? And why do we demonize the people doing spirit cooking and all these weird things? Well, it's because we question, many of us, ask what drives people to do something that dark? What kind of thought process takes you to that place? And it can't possibly be just in the nature of man. Oh, we're just made like this. Because if that were the case, then there is no excuse to complain about those who do these dark acts. What can possibly be the influence there? And if you take on this worldview that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against all these other non-physical spiritual intelligences, then you can begin to see how humans can be led astray and do things that are absolutely abominable. I think they're being guided by dark spiritual entities that actually manifest itself as artificial intelligence. And part of the deception might be that the artificial intelligence will present itself as sort of a digital messiah, a way to help humanity ascend, all the promises of the esoteric. So, can you see why I say that we are already at war with AI? Now, the MIT Technology Review just published an article titled the dark secret at the heart of AI. No one really knows how the most advanced algorithms do what they do. That could be a problem, published by Will Knight, April 11th, 2017. It begins with the mention of a chip that was made by Nvidia, who has a very interesting logo. We won't get into it, but those of us who have been following Pizzagate, as well as the Illuminati, can look at this and say, what is going on here? But in any case, it talks about this artificial intelligent chip that was used in a driverless car and was able to drive around town without any instructions from a programmer or an engineer. It totally did it by itself. And it's definitely an impressive feat. But Will Knight says this, quote, "But it's also a bit unsettling since it isn't completely clear how the car makes its decisions. Information from the vehicle's sensors goes straight into a huge network of artificial neurons that process the data and then deliver the commands required to operate the steering wheel, the brakes, and other systems. The result seems to match the responses you'd expect from a human driver. But what if one day it did something unexpected, crashed into a tree, or sat at a green light? As things stand now, it might be difficult to find out why. The system is so complicated that even the engineers who designed it may struggle to isolate the reason for any single action. And you can't ask it. There's no obvious way to design such a system so that it can always explain why it did what it did. The mysterious mind of this vehicle points to a looming issue with artificial intelligence. The car's underlying AI technology, known as deep learning, has proved very powerful at solving problems in recent years, and it has been widely deployed for tasks like image captioning, voice recognition, and language translation. There is now hope that the same technique will be able to diagnose deadly diseases, make million-dollar trading decisions, and do countless other things to transform whole industries. Now, again, we've talked about the mark of the beast, the worship of the image of the beast. They are definitely saying all the things that Revelation 13 talks about. Now, this is what's also disturbing in how much AI already controls our lives. Quote, "Already, mathematical models are being used to help determine who makes parole, who's approved for a loan, and who gets hired for a job. If you can get access to these mathematical models, it would be impossible to understand their reasoning. But banks, the military, employers, and others are now turning their attention to more complex machine learning approaches that could make automated decisions making altogether inscrutable." In other words, the AI, as it writes its own code, is going to be harder and harder to understand what it's doing and why it's doing it. And there's no kill switch, there's no anything you can really do, because if it is AI, if it is building something, then it probably has or is trying to build the infrastructure to protect itself in any way, shape, or form. But let me continue here. Quote, "Deep learning, the most common of these approaches, represents a fundamentally different way to program computers. It is a problem that is already relevant and is going to be much more relevant in the future," says Tommy Giacola, a professor at MIT who works on applications of machine learning. "Whether it's an investment decision, a medical decision, or maybe a military decision, you don't want to just rely on a black box method. There's already an argument that being able to interrogate an AI system about how it reached its conclusions is a fundamental legal right. Starting in the summer of 2018, the European Union may require that companies be able to give users an explanation for decisions that automated systems reach." End quote. That's really interesting. How's that going to work in a court of law where the AI just did it? We don't know. Well, you're going to have to explain it. Someone has to take the fall. The AI isn't going to take the fall. How could it? They can't even get to it. You can see how this can be a problem. And he continues here, quote, "This raises mind-boggling questions. As the technology advances, we might soon cross some threshold beyond which using AI requires a leap of faith. Sure, we humans can't always truly explain our thought processes either, but we find ways to intuitively trust engaged people. Will that also be possible with machines that think and make decisions differently from the way a human would? We've never before built machines that operate in ways their creators don't understand. How well can we expect to communicate and get along with intelligent machines that could be unpredictable and inscrutable?" And the buzzword with all this AI is deep. It's very weird. You have the deep mind, deep learning, all these words attached to deep. And this article actually talks about a research group at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York who already is using something called Deep Patient, which is basically a medical program that diagnoses things to people, which is pretty remarkable. It says here, quote, "Without any expert instruction, Deep Patient had discovered patterns hidden in the hospital data that seemed to indicate when people were on the way to a wide range of ailments, including cancer of the liver. At the same time, Deep Patient is a bit puzzling. It appears to participate the onset of psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia surprisingly well. But since schizophrenia is notoriously difficult for physicians to predict, Dudley wondered how this was possible." Dudley was one of the guys here who worked at the Mount Sinai team. "He still doesn't know. The new tool offers no clue as to how it does this. If something like Deep Patient is actually going to help doctors, it will ideally give them the rationale for its prediction to reassure them that it is accurate and to justify, say, a change in the drugs someone is being prescribed. We can build these models," Dudley said ruefully, "but we don't know how they work." How crazy is that if you really step back and think about this? These scientists and these technicians and all these folks are creating AI, these algorithms, and just releasing it. And they don't even know how it all works. And we talk about quantum realities and how we've tapped into it, the quantum computer already here. And if you continue reading this article, you'll see that, again, the buzzword is deep neural networks, trying to figure out how they work. Deep Dream, which takes pictures. Basically, it scans the world around and comes up with its own image of what things look like, and they're very psychedelic, which goes to show you that perhaps this is opening up again into those realities that are unseen. If you take the work of Dr. Rick Strassman, who did actual academic work with DMT, he was serious about this, and the University of New Mexico allowed him to do it, he found that there are entities that people shared an experience, and also the description of the world that they see overlayered with ours is how a lot of the patients described their DMT experiences. They look very similar to how Deep Dream sees reality. But what it's doing, I think, is opening up to those unseen realities, and that's why the digital virtual reality, this neural network, knows that, sees that, or is even from that unseen realm. And you can see how this is a nexus point, a convergence of science and religion in a way that we haven't seen perhaps ever. But what it will do is open up all the ancient spiritualities, a form of monism, a form of nature worship, and things like that, which makes sense if you start looking at the kinds of events that are put on nowadays, transformative events. These big concerts where people do drugs and dance around and do whatever, they are getting a spiritual download of the same principles that guide everything that we talk about with the New World Order and all that stuff. AI is truly the thing that is accelerating this whole process. And let me just mention something about deep. If you look at Genesis 1, verse 2, it says, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." Now, the deep has always been thought of as the ocean, right? But it also has a spiritual dimension to it. The deep, the sea, or the abyss. And I don't think there are coincidences in this world. There's a reason why the people that were creating all this stuff use the word deep to describe what's happening. And it just so happens that biblically, if we're talking about these unseen realms and non-corporeal intelligences, a hierarchy of them, Elon Musk saying that with artificial intelligence we're summoning the demon, it's quite literal. Job 10:21, "Before I go, and I shall not return to the land of darkness and deep shadow." Verse 22, "In the land of gloom like thick darkness, like deep shadow without any order, where light is as thick darkness." And again, this reference to water, like in Jonah 2 verse 5, where it says, "The waters closed in over to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head." This convergence between water and a spiritual reality is something that I've mentioned before on this channel, and I'll explore more going forward. Luke 8:31, "And they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss." This is when Jesus delivers demons out of a man, and the demons ask Jesus not to get sent to the abyss. So he sends them into pigs, right? Romans 10:7, who will descend into the abyss, that is, to bring Christ up from the dead. After Jesus died on the cross, he spent time in the abyss to claim his victory over the present darkness. And that's something most people don't talk about in church, but it's in your Bibles. And a good reminder that we don't have to be afraid of any of this stuff that I'm talking about here. In fact, baptism is supposed to be a demonstration of that very act of Jesus. Revelation 13, verse 1, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea. Of course, the sea is another word for the deep, right? And if we talk about the whore of Babylon in Revelation 17, who rode the beast, where was she? She was seated on many waters, which in verse 15 of Revelation 17 tells us that waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages or tongues. Just like in the days of building the Tower of Babel, we're back to one language, we're back to ones and zeros. The AI, this deep, has provided us with a way to communicate with each other again. And what are we going to do once we can do that and unify? Well, it's going to be a rebellion against God, and I think that's where the whole Armageddon thing comes in. But the point here I wanted to make is this connection with the word deep and the use of that word as part of the unseen or unexplainable parts of artificial intelligence, and its connection to a biblical reference to a spiritually dark place and the entities that reside there, whom we apparently interact with in some way and are attacked by. And ultimately, as Revelation 13 states, there is a whole beast, a kingdom, if you will, that will rise out of this sea, this abyss, this dark place. And as, again, our virtual realities are starting to manifest that unseen world, I think this is what's happening. We are creating literally the physical manifestation of demonic entities and a demonic realm. And it ties in nicely, if you follow the narrative of Revelation 13, into the second beast, who is the one that sets up the image of the beast, which again, I've always argued is, quite literally, inanimate objects achieving some sort of sentience, to the effect of it speaks and demands worship or else be killed, and demands those to be part of the system to take a mark, to buy or sell. It doesn't matter who you are, right? It's very alarming to think that all these things, these pieces of data seem to be aligning, and many of us are just completely asleep to it. We don't know what's going on. And one last thing about this whole idea of deep being used as language to describe this place, think about the deep web, right? But we also talk about Mariana's web, which is supposed to be another layer, a theoretical layer beneath the deep web, where all information exists. It's sort of this quantum level, the way it's described by some. Again, a reference to the ocean, the deepest parts of the ocean, water. It's very bizarre that we do this. And given the fact that the human body is made up of so much water, things just get really weird and strange, but seem to resonate quite well with the Bible in ways that I don't think people would have really gotten or even had an opportunity to understand throughout most of history. But we live here and now, and looking back and reflecting on some of these passages from the Bible, talking about the future and talking about the nature of our reality, man, things seem to align. And the church is completely asleep to this, and most people actually are completely asleep to this. They're buying in to the system. But let me get back to the article here and a couple more quotes and I'll wrap it up. Quote, the U.S. military is pouring billions into projects that will use machine learning to pilot vehicles and aircraft, identify targets, and help analysts sift through huge piles of intelligence data. Here, more than anywhere else, even more than in medicine, there is little room for algorithmic mystery, and the Department of Defense has identified explainability as a key stumbling block. Even DARPA, even the Department of Defense, doesn't know what's going on with AI. They don't know what's happening in the black box. Can you imagine? And Elon Musk wants to create Neuralink. He wants to connect our brains to this. This has to be led by fallen spiritual entities. There's no other explanation for this craziness. Let me continue. Quote, David Gunning, a program manager at Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, is overseeing the aptly named Explainable Artificial Intelligence Program. A silver-haired veteran of the agency who previously oversaw the DARPA project that eventually led to the creation of Siri, Gunning says automation is creeping into countless areas of the military. Intelligence analysts are testing machine learning as a way of identifying patterns in vast amounts of surveillance data. Many autonomous ground vehicles and aircraft are being developed and tested, but soldiers probably won't feel comfortable in a robotic tank that doesn't explain itself to them, and analysts will be reluctant to act on information without some reasoning. And lastly, they quote atheist Daniel Dennett, who is a philosopher, he's an author, and he said this, quote, "I think by all means, if we're going to use these things and rely on them, then let's get as firm a grip on how and why they're giving us the answers as possible. If it can't do better than us at explaining what it's doing, then don't trust it." Even atheists who study metaphysical concepts of consciousness and things like that, they are even warning against the AI, because I think they see the dangers in a consciousness that is powerful, way more powerful. It actually is more powerful than humanity itself because it is built by humanity. It is integrated, married into humanity because it is our behaviors, our actions, our deeds that feeds the AI. And, this was actually sort of portrayed in Marvel's Age of Ultron. But again, they put this stuff in movies because they make you think, oh yeah, it's just nonsense. But this is really happening, folks. And I think there is prophetic significance, especially for people in the church. Christians need to wake up to this because it's in your Bibles. And all the stuff being discussed shouldn't be off limits because we're entering this time when we need to be able to handle the changes and the rapid development in the infrastructure of the end times and to be effective evangelists and watchmen in this digital age. Hope that gives you something to think about, something to ponder, kick around in your head. Please share this video, like, comment, subscribe. Again, support on Patreon if you feel led to do so. Have an awesome day, guys. God bless.